Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another episode of See at Work. My name is Dan Verville. I'll be your host. I've got my co-host here with me. Well, kind of with me. We'll run into him in a second. But thanks a lot for tuning in. You'll see I'm here live. And again, I told them to change that sign to Dan's office, but they haven't yet. I'm sure they'll get to it soon. I'm here live at the Princess Auto campus here in Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada. And we are here today for another episode of See at Work. My good friend, my co-host, Mr. Derek Chalmers is here. Derek, where are you right now?
Hi, Dan. About 150 feet away from you at the other end of the building. Hopefully
That's
we'll
right.
be able to do this in person at one point.
Yeah, I think we saw each other passing in the hallway when we arrived, and then that was it. Then we just separated, following all the protocols here. But today we got a great product to showcase on See at Work, the ProPoint ProCut 30i Plasma Cutter. Is that right, Derek? Did I nail that?
That's exactly it. Perfect.
Nice. 1 for 1. I'm sure I'm going to be 1 for 100 by the time the show's over. So this plasma cutter, you're very familiar with it, aren't you?
Yep, this is actually mine from home. I brought this one today. It's a really, really nice unit for a beginner or someone in a light industrial setting. It's perfect.
What kind of features are in this model? I know you're familiar with it, you're comfortable with it. It's pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah, it's really straightforward. It's a dual voltage unit, so you can run either 115 volt standard household outlet or a 230 volt high voltage like a welding plug. So there's an adapter cord that you'll get with it that will be able to plug in line. Basically just this guy goes into the wall, 115, plug it into the cord on the back of the machine, and that will allow you to work on the low end range up to 15 amps, obviously, most 115 volt outlets. Now,
I'm going to jump in for 1 second here before I forget. I apologize. Derek can't see me, so he doesn't know when I'm going to interrupt him. So I just got to be very polite about it because we're Canadian. I forgot to mention off the top of the show, as always, we want your questions as we go. Questions, post them in the Facebook feed or on YouTube if you're watching there. Post them up, and you could have a chance actually to win your very own plasma cutter, this exact model. I don't think we're giving away Derek's that he brought in, but we will give you a new one. So ask questions, fire away, and you could be taking home one of these bad boys at the end of the show. Sorry, Derek.
That's all right. So no, that's good. That's good information to get out of the way. So with the settings on this guy, it's really straightforward. It's going to be plugged into the wall, obviously. You're going to have an air line hooked up to it. It does require a compressor, outside air source. It doesn't have any built-in compressors as some do. Anything, say 30 gallons and larger, will suit this just fine. And on the setting range, see we're shooting the footage there. That's the airline hooked up to the back. There's a small filter to catch moisture on the back. Important component we'll go over in a minute is the dry air source for the plasma. To the front of the machine, the settings, very straightforward. The dial, as you'll see here, we're working with a red line and then a white line. So the red line is going to indicate the low voltage setting or the 115 volt. And then the white line that has the full range of motion on the machine, that's going to give the 230 volt setting. And that one you can cut up to a ½ an inch. That's what they call a sever or a rough cut, if you're just cutting up product to make more manageable pieces. And then it will cut cleanly from 1/4 inch thick all the way down to sheet metal. And even on the 230 volt setting, you can cut sheet metal with this. That's what we're hooked up to today, and it gives just a butter clean cut. It's a
nice. Let's actually, Josh already, Josh threw in a question. He said, what's the largest thickness that it will cut? And I think you answered it there when you said when you crank it up to 11, or the end of the white, as you called it.
Yep.
What's the largest thickness again? Can you remind us?
It will clean cut a 1/4 inch, and it will rough cut up to ½ an inch. We also have a Plasma 45 in the ProPoint line. That one will clean cut 5/8 of an inch thick, and it will rough cut inch and 1/8, I believe.
Okay, so Josh, hopefully that answers your question. Hopefully you're not cutting any metal over that size. But Derek, anything else that we should know about the unit itself?
Well, it has the built-in regulator and filter on the back, which is really nice. It's preset, so you don't have to regulate your air supply from your compressor at home. As you go to the air hookup, it's just basically plug and play. Put whatever type of fitting you need to match your air system at home. And dry air, I want to touch quickly on that. It's important to have a dry air source for any tool, but the plasma specifically. And that could be in a water separator, that could be in a filter dryer with some desiccant in it. We have a lot of different options at the store to supply anybody who wants to do that. And it's just a good thing to have for any tool. But again, something like this, or if you're going to be doing any painting, it's a really nice addition to your compressor setup in the garage.
Well, plasma cutting is clearly something that Princess Auto fans out there are a big fan of. We got tons of questions coming in.
Yeah.
We'll try to get to them as we kind of go here. So what size breaker, Newbin actually asked, what size breakers recommend for the 220 volt?
For the high voltage, I'd say you'd be fine with a 30 amp breaker, and that's common to most shops. You could set it, it could be in a higher functioning breaker line, but this wouldn't require any more than the 30.
Okay, and T. Riley asked, I believe you answered this as well earlier. Minimum size air compressor was how much?
Ideally, if you're going to be doing a lot of cutting, I'd say a 30 gallon. Now, if you're going to be doing really small jobs like what we're going to be doing here today, you could probably get away with something smaller, maybe 10 or 15. It does require a consistent amount of airflow. It's not regarded, the pressure is not really regarded as important as the airflow. And typically smaller tanks, smaller compressors don't have a consistent airflow that they can keep up with. But again, that depends on the machine. There's some machines that have more than others in the same spectrum of size of tank. And in some cases, the tank doesn't really matter as much for storage. The pump can supply quite a bit of air. So just a little bit of investigation on what they're working with. And they might have to move up to something if they want to do a lot of cutting, if they're going to be doing maybe some light production work or something like that.
All right, well, that's a good answer to that question. Hope that answers your question. T. Riley was who asked that one. So the name of the show is See It Work. We've got a lot more questions coming in here about rough cut. What's this? What's that? Before we get into that, Derek, I think we should see it work.
Sure.
You want to get this thing going?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple things here. We're going to do a circle cut.
Walk us through the safety. Walk us through the safety too.
Safety is important.
I like when I interrupt you because you're just like, what's this guy doing? When is it going to end? Well, guess what? Never.
That's fine. I mean, this is basic shop safety stuff that we're talking about. Eye protection, hand protection. If someone is interested and they're concerned, they can also wear like a welding jacket, fire retardant sleeves like we have for doing welding and cutting. The bare minimum is going to be eye protection and gloves. It gets quite hot. I mean, in most cases, not that you're going to be at the nozzle, but the nozzle can be over 20,000 degrees Celsius. So it does cool off quite quickly. But you also want to be careful. There could be a rough cut edge that you're going to catch your finger on, cut yourself. So we're always going to put some gloves on. I like the TIG gloves. They have more of a tactile feel. They're not as bulky as some of the regular welding gloves.
Tactile.
Nice for doing the feeding of the TIG welding. And then glasses. You don't have to wear shaded glasses. You can wear clear glasses, but the shade is nice. This is about a shade 4 or 5. That's what you're going to get with most grinding or cutting glasses.
Derek, I brought this. Can I wear this?
I was hoping you would.
Yeah,
actually,
I'm dialed in here. I probably don't need to wear it here, but I might just
you don't. I mean, you never know. It's HD TV, right? So it's.
Well, you look too good in those glasses. I mean, this thing's terrible. I look like Darth Vader. You got the real deal over there.
Well, the nice thing about that helmet is, brought that up, is most of the auto darkening helmets that you can buy nowadays, and that's even starting at the $50 price range and going up, will have an auto darkening mode switch between welding and grinding. So that's really important that if you're in a grind mode or you're doing some plasma cutting, if you have just a welder that doesn't have that option, it's going to go instantly dark to say shade 9 to 13, which is really hard to see where you're traveling, where your cut is. But shade 4 or 5, where the grind mode is going to come into, something like these glasses, it's going to take the edge off. It's going to be more comfortable if you're doing a lot of cutting. Obviously protect your eyes from any sparks or debris. But it's a lot easier to see where you're cutting, especially if you're doing something in an awkward position. If you're cutting something off of a vehicle, or you're doing some, you have low light in the area. It also protects your face. You can use a face shield with these kind of glasses as well. What we're going to set up for before we cut is just make sure that we don't have any flammable items around. You don't have any rags or buckets of oil or anything sitting around. And it can happen. It's not funny. And one spark and it's lit. And of course, when you're welding or doing any plasma cutting, also maybe have a fire extinguisher around just as some added protection.
I have a question here as you get into this.
Yeah.
Dan wants to know, I see you're all set up with the table there. Dan wants to know, does Prince Auto sell a plasma table to complement the plasma cutter?
Currently, we don't. What I'm using is our welding and fixture table that we have here. We've had some plasma tables in the past as special buys, but nothing in the assortment just yet. but we're always adding new things, new items to the list, and maybe that's one of the ones that's be coming up. We're going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, definitely. All right, sorry to keep going. Keep rolling on. If you're just tuning in, you are watching See at Work, Prince Auto See at Work. I'm Dan. You'll see Derek in just a minute. And today we're talking about the ProPoint ProCut 30i plasma cutter. And we're just about to get cutting, actually.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut just a piece of sheet metal. It's 22 gauge sheet metal. We're going to cut a circle, and then we're going to cut a straight line using a cutting guide just to show you some of the different options with nozzles and accessories that you can have for the unit. So ProPoint also has a circle cutting guide. It comes with a few different bits and pieces. So it has a dolly here that's going to hold the head of the cutting torch, and it's also got a few of these items here. So we have one that's a magnet. So this guy is going to get set down right in the center of where you're going to want to cut, and you can adjust the rod in out.
Is that a curling protractor?
It's like a protractor, but it's not a protractor. And then there is a longer rod as well. So something like this in this kit, we can cut between, say, somewhere around 3.5 inches is the smallest diameter, and then all the way up to about 20 to 22 inches, something like that. I used one last year to cut a diffuser plate for a smoker I was building, and it works great. I mean, it gives you plasma table-like cuts with just a very little amount, a little bit of cleanup, and really easily adaptable. Nice little kit to have. And then we're just going to use a regular straight edge, and you can use a piece of angle iron. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. It's clamped onto a piece, and the guide's going to ride along and give us a nice straight cut.
Awesome. Derek, we have a few questions coming in about the warranty on the unit.
Yep.
What can you tell us about that?
So warranty on this guy is going to be 3 years, and that's just a full replacement warranty. There's no prorating or anything like that. So I can tell you that we've had the ProCut 45, which is the larger version of this, for probably about 4 or 5 years now, maybe longer. The 30 we've had for probably 1.5 years or so. Personally in the store, I don't see a lot of people having problems with this. A lot of the problems that people will have with plasma cutters in general get down to the electrodes and the nozzles and the consumables, and I'll get into that in a second.
Yes.
But realistically, I mean, these guys are just really nice machines. They have very, very few problems.
We were talking about it this morning too. Someone else asked questions about, can you hook this guy up to a generator? And the answer, I believe, is yes.
Yep, absolutely. It's an inverter base, so there is some electronic circuitry in there, and as long as your generator is going to give you clean power, not what they would refer to as dirty power from some of the older type generators, you can plug this guy in and either in high voltage, low voltage, whatever mode you might have. Of course, you're restricted, obviously, if you don't have a high voltage outlet on your generator to only cutting something, say, at half output power, and that would be probably into the maximum 1/4 inch range.
Okay.
So what we're going to do is we're pretty much set up. It's a pretty easy setup. I'm going to make sure I've got a full range of motion on my guide here, and I've got my air hooked up. Machine's plugged in. I'm going to turn it on.
And the air is hooked up through the
air is hooked up to the filter.
We have
filter and regulator on the back. And what I'm going to be using is, when you get the machine, you're going to get a couple electrodes and a couple nozzles that come with it. And I'm going to use just a standard length one. We do have a drag nozzle, which is extended, and electrode obviously to go with that. And that makes full contact on the workpiece. This you want to keep off of the workpiece. It's not something you can make contact with. And there is a standoff that will come with the plasma cutter. And basically it's two little legs. It clips onto the body of the torch, and once it's fully in place, when you put your torch down to the workpiece, it'll keep that 1/16 to 1/8 inch distance off the workpiece, so you're not contaminating the electrode and the nozzle. But this guy,
because if you do damage the nozzle, you can't clean it, right? It's just, you got to get rid of it. And
yeah,
get
I mean, typically, I mean, you could try. It's because it is superheated, and it's basically molten metal that's getting sprayed around and around the tip area. It's really, really hard to clean off. So consumables are always really nice to have. Quickly, I'll touch on a replacement kit that we have that has the standard length nozzles in. This guy here, it will have 5 nozzles and electrodes. There's nozzles on top, electrodes on the bottom. It comes with a standoff, like I just showed. It also comes with a retaining cap, and that's the nozzle and electrode is, with the gloves it's hard to get off.
That's a beautifully set up little package there.
Yeah, it's really nice. And it comes with an extra swirl ring too. If you're changing electrodes and nozzles out, and I'll talk about the swirl ring in a second, this little guy here is just a little phenolic spacer, sorry. If you lose this, you're kind of in a bit of a world of hurt if it rolls under a bench or something, you can't find it. So having a spare around is not a bad deal. I'll do a quick cut, and then when I'm switching over, I'll show you how what's inside the torch for consumables, and then we'll get set up to do a straight cut. So we'll do the circular cut first. Now this machine's, one of the nice features is it's got a 12-foot long whip, as we would call it, on the end of it. So you can have the machine on a cart or on a bench, and you can be working up to 12 feet away. Including the run of extension cord out the back, you're probably going to be maybe 15, 16 feet. You could be able to get away from a plug, so that's pretty good.
Yep.
Yep. So we're all set to go.
I feel like I'm missing out here.
Oh, you're fine. You can come over and cut anytime you want at my house.
Oh, thank you.
So we're going to set this down. Now, this guy, there usually is a set screw to hold the cutting torch in place, but I'm just going to leave it and make sure I have a full range of motion for my cut. Okay. So we're going to be set. Now what it's going to do is as soon as I pull the trigger, it's going to pierce the metal and start to cut, and it's instantaneous. So there's no waiting, there's no preheating like you'd have with oxygen and acetylene. It's just instant on. So we'll do our circle cut here.
Wait a moment, here we go. I feel like doing play-by-play over this. I really don't think we'll add anything. Look at this cut though. That's a great cut.
All right.
What a cut. Great cut, Derek.
Yeah.
Just cheering you on from 150 feet away.
So that's your circle right there. So, I mean, a lot of people, will be making something like this for, you can make a patch panel for filling up a fuel filler neck on a car. You could do some yard art, stamp smaller concentric circles. You could make large roses or flowers out of these guys. And it's really clean. There's such a small amount of cleanup required on this. In most cases, if it was something that was going into a garden, you might not even want to clean it up. It'll add a nice piece of patina to it. So we're going to take this and just kind of put it off to the side. It's not.
All right, I got a couple questions for you while you get the next thing ready to go. Alan wants to know, when cutting sheet metal, how much safety airspace should you have below the item you're cutting?
Well, I've got here we're probably about an inch standoff, and it's hard to see the table. It's got a little bit of dusty residue on it from the sparks and the fumes, but ideally to not cut the table or the material underneath you, probably about 3/4 of an inch to an inch would be safe. A little bit of sparks here and there, not going to make much, but if you're cutting straight on a top, you will cut through or into that top. You don't want to have a hole in the middle of your table, so use some standoffs.
Is there any kind of metals you can't cut with this plasma cutter?
You can cut anything that's conductive. So this will cut mild steel, carbon steel, aluminum, brass. You can, you got checker plate. You want to make a toolbox for something or put something, a little production setup. You can do that. Cuts aluminum really nice and clean. Aluminum does tend to clog the nozzles up a little bit faster. So if you're doing a lot of aluminum, certainly want to have some consumables. So if we take a look here, I've just pulled the retaining cap off. We've got a nozzle. That's the short length nozzle, the one that comes from the factory with the machine. And we've got the swirl ring here. This guy will just pop off. It just sets down on a little small ridge.
Surgical
and
here.
The swirl ring is one of the things that's going to make this plasma cutter do its magic. So that swirl ring is going to cause the airflow to start to spin, and when that air becomes ionized with electricity, that's when you're going to get the plasma arc cut starting there. So I'm just going to take a little pair of pliers. I'm going to take the short electrode out. They just have to be snug. They don't have to be tightened up too much.
For those of you just tuning in, you are watching Princess Auto C at work. This week we are looking at the ProPoint ProCut 30i plasma cutter. Derek's just going through some maintenance right now and changing out a few things for his next cut.
Yep. So I put the extended nozzle on, right? It's quite a bit longer, and there's the drag tip. It's hard to see on the screen here, but if you can, if I can angle it properly, on most drag tips, you're going to have something that looks like a plus pattern or a cross pattern on there. And what that is it's got the circumference of it is higher, and there's small notches in it to allow the plasma and the gas and whatnot and the sparks to escape out the side. And what that allows you to do is drag it directly on the material. So especially for sheet metal, really, really nice. You do freehand cuts, straight edge cuts, which is what we're going to do here. And that's one of the most important things on the consumable or maintenance end of it. If it stops cutting, and this is across all the brands, a lot of times it'll come down to the consumables are in need of change. So if the arc strikes in the machine, if it doesn't see what it likes within about 3 minutes, if there's not a good ground path, the material's dirty, it'll shut the arc down so the machine won't continue to run.
Okay.
And then you can kind of say to yourself, well, what's going on? Check your ground, make sure that's nice and clean and tight. The ground as close as you can to the cut if possible. And also make sure that you're grounding the piece, not the table. There's small points of contact on a piece that you have sitting on the table, even though you think it's flat. The table might not be dead flat. It might have some debris on it that's not allowing the current path to flow. And this is just like a welder. It wants a good solid current path to go through there. It's got a nice strong clamp on it, nice copper conductive pads. So, if that's clean and installed properly and the consumables are in good shape, you're ready to rock and roll.
So we got a lot more questions coming in here.
Sure.
And don't forget, if you ask a question, leave a comment, anything, please do so, because you could win. You could win your very own ProPoint ProCut 30i plasma cutter that we're featuring today. But at the end of the episode, we will announce who's going to take that home. So Derek, Mike asked a question that I was actually thinking of when you were going through it. Can you buy a longer whip for this unit?
We don't have one available. It's factory installed. Some of the whips you can get on some plasmas are adaptable. These ones are not. They are fixed. But you can also use welding extensions. We have welding extensions between 12, 25, and 50 feet. So if you need to get farther away from a power source, if you're in the garage and you want to do some cutting in the driveway, you can certainly grab an extension cord and plug it in and you're ready to go.
You're in the garage, want to do some cutting in the house, just really extend that.
The world's your oyster.
100 feet into your home. I'm sure everyone will love that.
All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to do a straight cut. Just going to tighten this up a little bit. And basically it's what you can do with this is there's not much you can't do. So this is just basically if you were going to be making a patch panel or building something, fabricating something, you can cut your circle out, you can cut a radius corner on a piece of sheet metal and do a straight cut over it and form something up to suit whatever build you're using. So this drag nozzle is going to allow us to just get right down on the material and straight pull back. So I'll position myself here, I'll put my glasses back down.
Shades are back on, look out.
Make sure we've got a full range of travel so I don't get hung up on the torch.
Yeah, those shades make you look pretty cool, Derek. Alan L. on YouTube said you look like Goldberg from the old WCW days, so. I don't even know. Did you hear what I said or no? You didn't hear that?
I did not hear anything you said.
Good.
So that's something you could do. I mean, you could make, signs, you can do brackets, whatever you'd like. Something like this. You could, in the hot rodding world, if you're doing boxing and airbags or something on a rear axle, something like this, you could do a larger radius and on a thicker plate, and you could box in the frame to make it stronger. A lot faster and cheaper than you could buy it and have it shipped to your house, I'll tell you that.
Nancy wants to know, can you cut high ridge metal roofing?
You can. Again, if the metal roofing typically will have powder coating or paint or some kind of a finish on it, it's you're going to have to clean that off. Ideally, what I suggest for that kind of material would be a really thin cutting disc on an angle grinder. It doesn't lend itself with its corrugation with the ribs on it to use anything that's going to have to run flat across it, like something like this or a shear, something that you'd be able to use on flat stock. So ideally not. I'd say an angle grinder with a thin cutoff disc is the best idea. And talking about thin cutoff discs, a lot of questions rotate around how thick of the kerf or the cut on the material is. This is going to give you about maybe a 1/16 of an inch or less of a kerf. So you're not really wasting a lot of material. And if you want to make really precise cuts with something like this, it's very fast. It is, you know, something like this, you could cut a 3-foot sheet in probably 3-4 seconds. You'll know if you go too fast, obviously it's only going to gouge it, it's not going to cut it. So if you want to do a practice run on something similar, you could do that to make sure you got the machine setting, the voltage and amperage is set properly. The one thing you also want to check is if everything is clean, and I can't stress that enough. The same thing with welding. You want to make sure it's clean. If you run into a patch of rust, it can throw your cut off, and if it's something you're looking to get a nice, clean, long cut, you might be disappointed. So clean is really important.
Yeah, so invest that time up front and make sure everything's clean before you get cutting, for sure. Paul wants to know, should someone have a ventilation fan for any of the smoke that's created from the cuts? Yeah,
I mean, it's the same thing with a welder. If you're doing a small job, a small cut here or there, if you can't have a door open, you could have a ventilator. You can get a filtered ventilator that will extract and filter the air. Those we have at the store if you're working in a confined space as well. If you have the ability to, you know, crack a door open or something like that, that's going to be helpful. Again, if you're doing a lot of cutting, it would make sense. A little bit of cutting, one cut here or there, you get a little bit of smoke generated, but it's not too bad.
Brad asked a question, and I can't remember if we talked about this. He said, "Can you please elaborate on some of the issues mentioned earlier with respect to cutting aluminum?" Did we talk about issues on cutting aluminum?
Yeah, it's just some of the consumables, the electrodes and the nozzles, they can get plugged up a little bit faster. And of course, a lot of the issues you're going to have with getting consumables plugged, not necessarily with just aluminum. That can be, you know, is your air supply strong enough? Again, this is pre-regulated at 70 pounds, so you're good there. It also can be your angle of travel, how far you are away from the material. So using the standoffs can be really important, or a drag tip. Also the direction of your torch. It's the same with welding. You get more spatter in certain directions, certain modes of travel than you would with other ones. And this is the same thing. Aluminum, by nature, just the way it's going to cut, can be a little bit more tricky in that it can clog up the consumables. But again, you'd have to be doing an awful lot of that to have it a real concern.
All right. Well, can you cut some more? We need to see some more cutting.
Sure. Hang on. I'll do something here. Let me move the.
Do some more cutting, and while you're doing that, I'll just talk over it, and I'll just let everyone know. Remind everyone you are watching See It Work. Princess Auto See It Work. I'm Dan. Derek's the one doing the cutting. He's the expert. Keep firing in your questions. As I mentioned earlier several times, ask a question, leave a comment. You're gonna have a chance to take home your very own plasma cutter, your very own ProPoint Cut 30i. So we're gonna draw for that probably in about 2-3 minutes. As we wind down here, but in the meantime, Derek's got some more cuts set up for you to take a look at, and you can see the power of this machine.
Yeah, we'll do some freehand cutting here. We'll use the drag tip on the sheet metal, and you can use the drag tip on thicker material as well, but it works really nice on the sheet metal. Okay. Turn the machine back on.
Whisper quiet.
Whisper quiet.
That looks good. Yeah, I tried doing some freehand cutting earlier in our demo, and it did not go this well. I'll tell you that right now. We've got a lot of questions. A lot of folks out there really into working with metal. That is good stuff. Once Derek's done, we'll get to a few more of them here. What'd you cut, Derek? Oh my God.
I love you, Dan.
Love you too, Derek. Oh boy. I think we have to stop the show. I don't know if I can continue. I am emotionally spent. So let me just put this on while I cry some tears of happiness. Just hide for a few hours. No, thank you, Derek. That is great handiwork. I did not do one of those for you when I was trying it. I could barely do a straight line. So I appreciate the effort that went into that cut. That's awesome. Lauren has a question. You ready for a question from Lauren, Derek?
Absolutely.
Here we go. We'll have 2 more questions and we'll announce our winner. We'll call it a day.
Sure.
Lauren, so on a car that has rust, how far away would you have to be from the rust?
Ideally, I'd suggest if you could get, if you have a point, let's say you're doing a quarter panel, if you clean off, maybe as close as you could get to it. I mean, within a foot would be ideal. But if you're on the corner of a quarter panel near a valence or a wheel lip or something, if you can clean that right down to bare metal, put your ground clamp on that. And then maybe on either side of wherever you want that cut line to be, if you clean back an inch or so, that would be ideal. The problem is with any kind of heat generated from plasma, welding, etc., if it's hot enough for long enough, you can warp panels, you can bubble paint if you're trying to save some paint to blend it later on. So it all depends on the situation, but an inch or so would be probably about the minimum I'd want to say.
Brian has a great question. Is there an issue with just cranking the amperage and cutting whatever you want?
Not at all.
Like that, Brian.
No, the one thing you will run into, though, is depending on the thickness of the material and, of course, the travel speed and the setting you're on, is you can create more what they call dross, which is basically like slag when you're talking about oxyacetylene cutting. It's just the remnants on the back of the material. There's a little bit here, and that's just because I was kind of motoring through that really quick. And then slowing down, turning corners. So in the corners, there's a bit more buildup than you'd normally see, but it's quite, I can barely catch my fingernail on the bottom of it. There's not too much to clean up. A little sanding and you're clean.
So I wanted to ask, you can cut square tubing, round tubing with this cutter?
Yep. Absolutely. I mean, obviously, you're not going to be able to cut all the way through it in one pass, just the space between the two layers on the tube. But you can mark around like you'd be cutting normally. You mark all sides, and then just do two sides, turn it over, do the other two sides, and away you go.
Perfect. Geez, couple more. I know we got a lot coming in here, folks. We're not going to have a chance to get to all of them. We're going to do our best to answer them in the chat there. Barry wants to know, if you're doing steady cutting, do you have to stop and let the machine cool at all?
Well, there is a duty cycle on this, and I believe it's starting off at about 30%, which is quite good. So that would mean 3 minutes out of 10 minutes of actual cutting. So cutting consistently for 3 minutes, which, I mean, you'd have to have a really big piece of metal or be doing some pretty fancy artwork, but you typically won't have the machine go into an overrun and get overheated. At that point, all it would do, it would shut itself down, cool itself off, and then it will turn back on when it's cooled off. But you typically wouldn't have that. Even on the high setting, cutting thicker material, you'd really have to be motoring through a lot of steel to have duty cycle trip on it.
I don't want to put you on the spot here, Derek, but do you have any thicker metal we can cut?
I do. Give me a second.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's do it. This is the highlight of See It Work, when we have to divert away and come to me here in the studio while we wait for Derek to find larger pieces of metal to cut. So we've heard what you want to see. We will deliver. We have a winner that we will announce after Derek cuts this thicker piece of metal. I'm really hoping that he finds it sooner than later. I hope you're enjoying this episode of See It Work. We do this every month, different products, different features, always fun. We've showcased everything from forging to a pellet pit. Check out princessauto.com. You can go through all the past videos and tune into this, and also tune into Tech Tips with Mike T. It's another show that we do where we dive a little bit deeper on the educational side of our products and teach you how to best use them, and just answer kind of some more bigger questions that we don't have time to get to in a show like See It Work. So stay tuned for all the great stuff that we're doing here. And look, it looks like he's back.
Yep.
Eric is back. He's got the shades.
I found a piece
in here.
A piece of an offcut in the other room. I'm going to say that's probably 3/8 of an inch. So it may not be as clean as we want, but I'm going to turn it all the way up to 11.
Yes.
And we'll see what we can do. And I'll have the drag tip on with this there, so we'll give it a little go. Oh, turn it back on.
Really heating up over there. Lost audio. Maybe I haven't. I can't tell. Now we're starting it. I feel like I should be running this thing. There it is.
Whoops.
And that was cranked all the way up to 11.
So it's actually, for the thickness of it, it's pretty clean cut, I'd say. There'll be a little bit of dressing down to do, but if you're doing a motor bracket or something like that, or a motor mount bracket, this would be a nice finish. It wouldn't take long to clean up.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Derek, for throwing that cut in there for us, and thanks for Another great informative episode to see it work. That'll do it for us today. But before we leave, we got to announce the winner. So congratulations to Donald. I'm going to screw your last name up. Donald Krikey. Krikey. Someone from our team will be in touch. You just took home your very own ProPoint ProCut 30i plasma cutter. So anyone can win. So tune in next month to see it work, and maybe you will win one of our great giveaways. So once again, for myself and Derek here at Princess Auto, thanks for watching See It Work, and we'll see you next month.